right.
We're ready to rock.
You know what time it is.
That's
when
right.
you hear the howl, you know what time it is. Hey, everyone. Welcome to The Mindful Warrior, episode number 17. My name's Nate Jackson. With me, as always, is Eben Britton. With me, as always, is Jed Bauer. And with me, as always, is Gandalf the Great, lounging on the floor. Hey, it's January 11th today, and just like last week, we don't have a guest. We're just going to stay in studio and rock it like that. I'm going to throw it over to our trusty conductor, Jed, to tell you about what it's going to be like.
All right, everybody. Welcome to a very special day where we will be litigating a very important case to all of us. We will be taking on Roger Goodell versus Cannabis. Over in one corner, we have the Ginger Hammer himself, Roger Goodell. Roger, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello. Thank you for having me here today. I think this is a very important topic that we're going to discuss, so I appreciate your willingness to have me in your studio.
All right, take it easy, buddy. Okay. And in the other corner, we have representing Cannabis and the players of the NFL, Eben Britton. Eben, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you. That was much better than Roger Goodell's opening statement. And I will now toss it to you for your opening arguments, and I will be timing you. And if you go over the time, you'll hear that. And if anybody has any objections, please raise them. Order in the court. And we are ready to hear this landmark case. So, Mr. Goodell, we'd like to hear your opening argument. Let me rephrase that. We would like to know why you hate marijuana so much.
Well, it's always been the league policy that we have followed the federal guidelines as far as what they've recommended as illegal. We do recognize that our players deal with a variety of injuries, and we have our doctors and scientists looking in to cannabis and marijuana research, but at this time, we don't have the information from them to make a change on our policy. Therefore, marijuana, cannabis, whatever you stoners want to call it, is still banned by our league. And if you test positive for it, you will be put in a substance abuse program. Now, this follows federal guidelines. We are in the United States of America. We take these laws very seriously. And so until that changes, we are not going to.
That's fantastic. That's great. You kept it under your allotted time. So I'm going to toss it over to Eben. And Eben, would you like to respond with an open argument for the case of marijuana?
Yes, thank you. Roger.
Yeah.
Honorable Judge Jed. Cannabis was a huge part of my healing process as an NFL football player. Dealing with the repetition of concussions and brain trauma as an offensive lineman. I'm smashing into another 300-pound individual 70, 80 times a game, 100 times a day in practice, head-to-head collisions.
That's wonderful.
I dealt with a laundry list of physical injuries, from a dislocated shoulder, herniated discs in my back, torn muscles and ligaments all over my body, concussions. And through that, I was given handfuls of prescription pills, these anti-inflammatories that are highly toxic to our bodies. Science is proving this. You can go and you can read a study about how Advil, ibuprofen, over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, actually, over long-term use, they cause kidney and liver damage. They cause more inflammation in the body. And these are things that pro football players rely on to get them out onto the field to produce at 100%. That's not even touching on the opiate issue yet. Opiates, we know they're highly addictive. They're incredibly toxic to our systems. They made me feel crazy. I experienced withdrawal symptoms after 2 or 3 days of prescribed usage, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with severe discomfort, needing to take more. Now, when I consumed cannabis, I was placed in a much more peaceful state. I was able to sleep. I was able to recover. I was able to be a calm, peaceful, functioning individual with my family and friends and in the community.
Will I be able to respond to all of these?
Wait a minute.
Sustained.
I mean, is this an opening statement
Objection.
or a memoir? Because
Overruled. You have 20 seconds to wrap up your...
To wrap this up, concussions are one of the number one issues the NFL is facing right now, leading players into this dark tunnel of CTE. We've got the federal government owns a patent on these chemical compounds as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. Why isn't that argument enough right now today to start moving the ball forward on cannabis, ending cannabis prohibition in the league?
Well, that's a great use of a metaphor or simile for moving the ball forward. You get 10 points for that. And also your opening argument was very uninflammatory, unlike the drugs that you claim to hate. I'm not sure which way I was going with that, but
Wow,
let's
nice
just
try.
keep going.
Nice.
And all right, Mr. Goodell, he touched on the issues of concussions. So what is the league's, stance on concussion and concussion treatment, and in the lieu of research showing marijuana being a helpful treatment for concussions, how do you respond? You have 45 seconds.
Well, in this great game that we have, we all understand the dangers of it, and there are things that we've learned about the body and the brain recently that have caused us to actually have to consider some of the ways that we treat and practice this game. We have, as you know, established a new concussion protocol. We have established independent neurologists on the sidelines that are watching for these symptoms for these players. We have established a brain trust for former players. We have increased payouts for brain damaged former players. As you know, there was $1 billion concussion settlement for former players, and so we are doing everything we can to address this situation of concussions while simultaneously trying to have our game grow. Because as we know, Jed, we're here because of football. We love football. That's what we're here for, right? So we want to let the game survive while dealing with this concussion injury or issue. And we put a lot of money into the research. And one of those elements I imagine you're getting to is the cannabis. You say that it is good for the brain or something like that. And I would ask you to provide me some studies to back that up. Now, I have been presented studies from Israeli scientists and doctors. Now, these are third world countries providing us with data, presumably, about things.
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means keep going. Sustain what you were talking about.
So until there is some certifiable scientific, American-born scientific proof that what we're dealing with here can be mitigated by cannabis, we're going to keep our policy the same as what I told you at the beginning of this. We are open to learning new things, but until there is definitive proof, until we get movement on the federal illegality of this plant, we are going to maintain our stance that it is illegal for our players to consume it.
Eben, would you like to respond to the derogatory statements Mr. Goodell just made about Jewish people? Because I have a doctor and he's Jewish and he's fantastic. What do you say?
I love Jews. I don't. Israel's not a third world country. Anyway, well, my question is: Raphael Mechoulam is the man that's heading up much of the.
I've never heard of him.
The
by the way,
What was that name?
Well, Raphael Mechoulam.
God bless you.
is he a Ninja Turtle?
He's not. He is an Israeli Jew, I believe, and he actually helped our own U.S. government gain their patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. Roger, do you think our U.S. government has spent the money on acquiring the patent for cannabis if they hadn't already put in the research, which has been done, spearheaded by Raphael Mechoulam and the National Institute of Health, which is a government organization where they've put they've found in science, studying, well, it is studies on rats, I'll give you that, but they've had profound results testing rats who have suffered brain trauma, giving them cannabinoids, and them recovering significantly from that. Also,
What do you mean recovering significantly? I mean, how can we relate that to our football
to the point of
players?
even reversing the effects of some of this brain trauma? The science essentially goes reading these scientific studies. I'm no scientist, but I can read. That might surprise you, Raj. I did get in the NFL as well.
Listen, I think our players are some of the finest, smartest,
Of course
most
you do.
successful individuals in the world. And
Of
so to
course.
disparage my opinion on that is rather offensive to me, Eben. I respect you and your journey, and I'm only here to listen and learn.
Thank you.
Would you like to object to that?
Objection.
Cool. Awesome. Overruled. Go on.
So in a concussion, all of these processes start to occur. One of them, damage occurs, right, in the brain. Somewhere in the brain, damage occurs. That brain has hit the inside wall of the skull. Receptors in the brain start to release this stuff called glutamate. And glutamate is there to initiate the recovery process. The problem is when it sits in there for long periods of time, because as we know, Raj, football players are not coming out of games who are concussed. Guys are not being pulled out of games still.
Well, object. I would object to that. There is a concussion protocol in place, as you know, that has been very effective over the last couple of years in curtailing the number of concussions, and we've established new robust return-to-play guidelines that have made players sit out the equitable time until they are healed 100% from their injury. We don't let them on the field until they're ready to go.
How about the young man from Houston who had a seizure on the field and was back out there playing the next play?
Well, as we stated in our joint press release with the union and the league, that was a breakdown of concussion protocol. We admit that nothing is perfect. We're always trying to learn. We saw that after the fact. There was in the chain of command a breakdown in that those who saw the footage did not alert those who didn't on the field and were in charge with bringing him out. You know, the guys who were down on the field didn't see that video. They saw it live. As you know, Eben, from playing football, you don't always see those slow motion replays yourself. And so, yes, the concussion protocol, is it perfect? No, it's not. But are we dedicated to making it as good as it can be? Yes, we are.
Well,
I would
that's
like
good
to interject here at some point because I wanted to circle back around to this. Earlier, I asked Mr. Goodell about concussion treatment, and your answer was you have $1 billion. Is taking money a cure for brain damage? Can you eat money, and does it help restore brain function?
I believe that you're trying to be funny right now, and
Objection! I'm hilarious.
So I will say, ha ha ha, funny joke, ha ha ha.
Let me finish on the concussion part of this thing. So glutamate, it's super toxic. It's just sitting there, stewing, killing brain cells, literally turning them to dust, right?
Literally? Objection.
Literally.
The use of metaphor is being mistaken for a factual approach, and so when I
literally destroying brain cells.
you are hold on, you're a football player, right?
I
So
was.
when you talk to me in these medical terms about what's literally happening in the brain and using big words, I don't believe you.
Okay.
Where did you learn
Let me
this?
finish.
What was your major, Eben?
Creative writing.
Oh, so you made this up. Wow.
Hilarious.
I didn't.
The
I
creative
didn't make
writing
it up. I read it.
major
I read it in a book.
is a doctor.
That's right. No, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist.
So how do you know all this?
I read. And I experience. So throughout my career, weed really became a main part of my pain management. It became a main part of my survival. And I believe that it kept me away from the pills. Even in my last 2 years in Chicago, I wasn't taking any opiates. I was taking maybe an Aleve once a week. But my main source of pain management was consuming cannabis. And I believe that coming out of my 15 years in football, my 6 years in the NFL, I'm in better shape because of that. There's no doubt in my mind. Cannabinoids have the power to cross the blood-brain barrier. They go in there and they neutralize this glutamate. You remember the glutamate? Very toxic. Very toxic,
Literally.
caused by concussions.
You literally remember it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do.
cannabinoids go in there and they neutralize the glutamate and help start to flush that shit out and help the brain start to heal and actually recover from these concussions. And I believe I had a firsthand experience of that throughout my football career. Consuming cannabis after practice, after games, it was my truly the one thing that helped me deal with the symptoms I was experiencing from playing football.
Okay. My response to that would be you were able to get the benefits of all of that while playing and while it was technically banned by the league. So what are you arguing for? You had access to it. You were able to use it. Why do you care so much? I will say that I represent the owners, okay? I represent the interests of the owners, and they are all billionaires, Eben, and they are close with a lot of lawmakers and politicians and very rich and powerful people. And those rich and powerful people have declared that cannabis is a Federal 1 narcotic. Federal Schedule 1.
Okay.
Federally illegal narcotic. And until that changes, can you imagine? I want you to put yourself in my shoes for a second, Eben. Can you imagine the hell that I would have to deal with if we started throwing our money behind cannabis research in places like Texas, for example, who have 2 NFL teams, one with the most powerful owner in the league? Now, I know that some people have said that he supports cannabis, and I understand that maybe a small piece of him does. But I think the larger piece of him wants to free his incarcerated players who've popped dirty because they're not smart enough to go around the test like you. See, there's some laws that are created with a wink, Eben. That's our society. Jaywalking, changing lanes without putting on your blinker, cannabis. These are things that if you use your mind, you can get around. Now, that's not to say that research doesn't need to be done and that someday the policies might change. But as of now, the political implications of us jumping behind cannabis are too heavy for us to risk. I'll give you another little thing to think about, okay? One of your arguments probably will be that it is medically legal in 29 states. And in 22 out of the 32 cities where NFL teams play, it is legal for medical reasons. We've done our research. We know this. And that might be an argument for some people. But for us, that tilts the playing field and makes and threatens the parity that we've created, worked so hard to create in this league. It needs to be the same across the board if we're going to change it, because that would incentivize players to go to different teams, and we can't have that. And so there are a lot of moving parts as to why we've maintained this policy. It is an ongoing policy. We have our doctors and scientists looking at it. And if there is a change, then we'll let you know.
All right, Eben. I'd like to direct this next question to you. Won't you think of the children?
I do. I do think of the children. I'm a father also. You know, the war on drugs didn't really convince anyone that drugs were bad. Marijuana use has continued with teenagers throughout the decades, probably throughout millennia. I mean, this plant is something that I think has introduced itself into human culture in more ways than we can imagine, even in tribal societies. Kids are going to do what they're going to do, first of all. If you have a curious teenager, I mean, that kid's going to find a way to do whatever he wants to do. Now, there's an education that has to happen. Educating people on the fact that this is a medicine, that it is to be respected, that it is a very potent and powerful substance, something that can take you places, expand your consciousness, expand your perspective of the world and of your experience of the world. And that's something that, in our culture, we like to shy away from. We like to pretend that nothing hurts, that life is all good, that, everyone should be able to go through life without needing anything to lean on or to get them through the hard times. And frankly, it's bullshit. We've got an epidemic of alcoholism and opiate addiction in this country, of drug addiction, and it's all based on this feeling of disconnection, this feeling of isolation that we all feel. And cannabis is really something, it's the antithesis of that. It's this non-toxic plant that comes from the earth. It's healing. You see it in children with epilepsy disorders. You're seeing it with military veterans coming home with PTSD and tons of physical damage, brain trauma. It's helping them get their lives back. It's helping them just live. You know, one thing that's bigger than the money, it's bigger than ownership interests, is that guys are dying. Guys are in horrific shape. Guys are killing themselves. Guys are losing their minds. Their families are falling apart. And this is spread throughout our country. Our football players are just a perfect little test tube of this whole experiment, because we put ourselves through the shit and we don't die necessarily on the field, and we come out of it and we can see the long-term effects of all this shit. And cannabis, frankly, is the beginning point for healing for many of these people. Ancient Ayurvedic medicine prescribed or suggested cannabis as a remedy for anyone dealing with hard labor or trauma. Physical hard labor or trauma. That means that you're enduring a lot of physical and mental stress, and this is something that can help mitigate the symptoms of that. And I believe that football is on that list.
Now, Mr. Goodell,
may I respond to
I was going to ask you, what'd you think of the children?
Well, before I get into the children, because his answer was really not about the children at all. He talked about his own anecdotal experience with the plant, which I appreciate and want to address.
Minus 5 points.
So you are making a great case, Eben, for the cannabis access for former players. You cited veterans coming home from the battlefield and having PTSD issues. You cited your own struggles after the fact, families falling apart, pain in the real world, isolation. All these things are a product of leaving the game, being alone in the real world. And we understand that this is something we were really trying to connect for former players, okay? But those things that you mentioned, isolation, not while you're playing. You're surrounded by your friends at all times. You have services to take care of all the things that you were talking about, mental health services. You have player development. You have doctors, of course, trainers, all these people that are looking after you. And so as a former player, you're not being tested for cannabis. So you're free to do whatever you want. Now, I don't know what you're arguing as far as our stance on this. We could try to create better support groups for former players that might include cannabis resources or funding for a cannabis fund for former players. That might be something we can talk about, okay? But for current players to be given marijuana at work or something. I don't know if that's what you're suggesting. It's too fraught. There are too many pitfalls there. And to get back to our judge's original question about the children.
The children.
We know how important our game is to kids all across the country and actually all across the world. And we care a lot about the younger generations of football players and their parents. And so our marketing arm is devoted to appeasing children and the older generation. We don't really go for millennials or people in their 30s. We're talking about older TV watchers and young kids playing the sport. Okay? And if we endorse this plant for those kids without proper research or proper scientific or medical guidelines or without fully understanding the issues, well, that not only is that negligent, but that's almost legally damning. And so we are going to play this slow, okay? Because the kids are watching, okay? The kids are watching.
Now, Mr. Goodell, you have said in many public statements you believe marijuana and cannabis are addictive. Can you elaborate on that point and what research you believe shows this to be a fact?
We have a group of very smart advisors, scientists, doctors who are always looking at this stuff. And as Eben pointed out earlier, the war on drugs is a thing. The drug consumption in this country is a problem. If you were to look in our prisons, drug offenders all over our prisons, and it's not just hard drugs. This is cannabis, marijuana, which you say is benign and, spiritual, all the things that you were saying that it did for you. Anecdotally, you, Eben Britton, had this reaction to this thing, but for many other individuals out there, it has landed them in jail for life. There are some people serving life sentences because they were addicted to pot, okay? There are guys out there who didn't make it to the NFL because they tested positive for pot because they were addicted. They were so high all the time they couldn't stop doing it. Okay? And I think if you walk around to a lot of these lower income communities where there's a lot of crime, what you'll find is a lot of people out there smoking pot. And so, look, the statistics are there. Okay, everyone knows that this is an addictive substance. It's
not an addictive substance.
Speak for yourself. Maybe you're not addicted, but say that to the millions and millions of people in prison, the millions and millions of people who can't get out of bed because they're watching shows and smoking bong rips and like eating cookies and stuff. We know this at the league office, that there are things that you don't know about what we know.
Eben, would you like to respond to that scathing statement?
See, I
think you need
you're
to
making
start,
my point
you need
for
to
me.
flip this argument around, man. You got to flip this argument around. First of all, there are millions of African Americans serving lifetime sentences for minimal marijuana possession charges, non-violent crimes. No one has ever consumed cannabis and gone on consumed cannabis specifically. I'm not saying, sure, some people might, smoke some weed and meanwhile that day go smoke some crack. I don't know. But people do not become violent consuming cannabis.
That is a speculative. I'm sorry, Judge. I must object. This is a speculative comment.
But you want to say hearsay.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
It's anecdotal experience.
Not even that. This is idealistic, like looking at the stars, social justice warrior stuff. We're talking about hard facts. What are we talking about, Evan?
No.
The argument you're making
the legal
is about
status
health.
of cannabis.
And now you're talking about the war on drugs and African-American incarceration levels. Listen.
Absolutely.
You want to throw that at the league office and tell us that essentially our policies are racist. Okay, a league office and a union office that is populated heavily by African-American men and women. Proud, professional, college-educated individuals who care a lot about this game and the players who play it. And for you to imply that we are in any way enacting racist policies on the players who we love, that offends me.
Do you love the players?
Oh, yes.
Because they make you a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
All right. 10 points for Roger Goodell for playing the reverse race card. Great job.
Right on.
And now let's move on.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, Eben. Do you have a response?
I don't have anything to argue with. Nonsense.
Okay, well, you're 5 points behind now. So.
I can tell you this, Evan.
Okay.
You might consider it nonsense, but you can't. We can't be inside your head, Evan. We have to deal with facts. We have to deal with science.
The scheduling of cannabis currently is a tool for law enforcement, our government, to throw innocent black men in prison.
And do you believe there's like the authoritarian white man who's plucking them out of their communities and laughing and throwing away the key and cashing in all the way to the bank? Is that?
No, it's much more subtle than that.
So what? Are there good men who are? I believe in our U.S. government. I believe in the sanctity of the U.S. government. And at the league office and the NFL, the owners that I represent work hand and foot with those government officials to ensure that our players are represented correctly. And I'm offended. I'm offended by your inference that what we do is in any way racially motivated.
Good. You're offended.
All right, let's move on. Now, Eben, I'm going to throw one of Mr. Goodell's quotes to you to respond. He has said it's unsafe, cannabis is unsafe for players Now, would you feel unsafe if other players on the field were as high as you were?
No. I think every player is pretty much high on the field on whether it's Vicodin, some sort of stimulant, amphetamine, or cannabis, or even alcohol. I mean, guys do whatever it takes to get on the field, to get us hyped, to get into that aggressive, violent mindset that we all need to be in, to be out there to play the game. And, sure. I mean, that was something every single guy is taking his stack of whatever it might be to get him ready for the game. So that wasn't something I thought about.
May I respond
Please
to that,
respond.
Your Honor?
Thank you for calling me Your Honor.
Eben, as you know, the average career length in the NFL is 3.5 years. This isn't a statistic that we like to brag about at the league office. We don't feel great about it. But what we have learned with our research is that the players who tend to abuse substances are not in their first 3 years. These are players in their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th years and beyond who tend to be substance abusers. And so insinuating that everyone on the field is gassed up on some kind of narcotic is disingenuous, Eben, and actually, I believe, slightly disrespectful toward the craft of these individual players who have gotten there purely by passing drug tests, by doing the right things, doing it the right way. And so these guys out there, while yes, some of them are dealing with very real problems that force them to try what they can to get on the field, and the pressure is real for them to stay there. I'll give you that. But to insinuate that they're all on drugs, well, I have to push back against that. That's something that we don't endorse.
Just for the record, I want to record that, Mr. Goodell, you are still extremely offended by these insinuations?
Extremely.
Extremely. Fantastic. Okay, now let's move on to opioids. We have definitely touched on them as a periphery subject to cannabis and its use. Mr. Goodell, opioids are a problem in the league, in the country. Do you, in the NFL, have anything you're doing in prevention and treatment and to try to hopefully move on?
Yes, that's a good question, and absolutely we are. Now, we will admit that, like the rest of the country, we developed perhaps an over-dependency on opioids as pain killers. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but last year the DEA raided the medical caches of several NFL teams, and we're investigating this. We've been to court several times over this issue. And on top of that, we've been dealing directly with government officials who are, as you know, addressing the problem as well, trying to curtail both the supply and the demand of this very dangerous substance. So we have sent memos to all of our team doctors. We have updated them as to the government guidelines. We have stayed up to date with the new scientific developments there. But I must tell you that there is a place for opioids in this society, and especially for some of the acute injuries and damage that some of these players are incurring on the field. And so what we don't want to do is take away something that might help the recovery and ease the pain of a player. But what we also don't want to do is lead them down the dangerous path of addiction. And so it is a fine line to walk, and we're doing all the research we can. We have our scientists and our doctors on it, and we will let you know if anything else happens.
You're not doing all the research you can.
Eben, would you like to elaborate and explain if what he's saying is truthful from your experience in the NFL?
Well, first of all, you're not doing all the research you can because cannabis isn't being researched. Opiates, NFL players are 4 times as likely to abuse opiates as the average American.
According to what study?
According to the LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post.
All 3 of them?
All 3 have reported that story.
Wow.
Now, what does that say? DEA's raiding NFL locker rooms, training rooms, finding discrepancies in the amounts of Vicodin and opiates that are being prescribed to players and the amounts that there should be, right? Is that correct?
Correct. In response to a lawsuit.
Right. And as a player,
and by the way, they didn't write citations for any. They didn't find any of these teams or players. They were simply looking. We got the message.
Right. Now, guys are leaving their careers addicted to painkillers, leaving with handfuls, bottles of prescription painkillers like Vicodin, Percocet, and they're just shoved out the door, walking out the door with their box of stuff, leaving the facility. Some of these guys never to play in the NFL again. Their careers are over, and they continue with these opiate addictions. They just have to keep taking the pills. And many of those guys are guys who never knew about cannabis, never thought that cannabis could be something to alleviate those withdrawal symptoms, to get them through that period of needing painkillers. Myself included, I was able to wean myself off of painkillers using cannabis. I was able to even get painkillers out of my life and out of my daily regimen using cannabis. And it's a much safer alternative. It's something that's sustainable for guys who are experiencing immense amounts of trauma on a daily basis, who are putting their bodies through hell. And they need something to produce at the high level that the NFL requires. And cannabis is the entryway of mitigating much of that addiction.
For
Research.
you.
For any guy playing football.
Any guy.
Any guy playing football.
Now, call me crazy here, but I am a big fan of this podcast, and I do listen to every episode. And several episodes ago, you had a guest, very smart guy named Len May, cannabis geneticist. See, I'm doing my research, and he enlightened me to the fact that 19% of the populace has a gene that rejects cannabis, or THC specifically.
THC.
Right. And so how do you reconcile putting 1/5 of your players at risk for adverse reactions? And as you know, cannabis does trigger psychotic events in people who are bipolar.
Sure.
Okay? That is a fact.
For sure.
And so if you're going to give these guys cannabis who are susceptible for reaction, because you played with these guys, a lot of them are bipolar and a lot of them are psychotic.
Sure, a lot of mental illness.
And so you might be triggering a psychotic episode with something that you said
No,
worked
let me
for
stop
you.
you right there.
Well,
Let me stop you right there.
hold on, Evan. You got your time. I am countering your argument. And if this is something that you don't feel comfortable with, then maybe you should just stop this right here. Okay? This is a dirty game. Okay? And what I'm saying is that we don't have enough facts, Eben. We don't. Your anecdotal experience is not enough for us to change policy.
So let me stop you there. The reason cannabis in one form or another, now there are many chemical compounds found in the cannabis plant. Not only do you have THC.
Are you also a chemist?
I've done my research.
Okay.
You've got CBD. You've got the raw acids, THCA, CBDA. You've got CBG, CBN, all these different chemical compounds, terpenes, flavonoids, antioxidants that have healing properties for the human body. Now, one of the most amazing things happening in the cannabis industry, I know you live in D.C., the Wild West of cannabis at the moment. Out in California, where we've just gone adult use legal, beautiful thing that's happening in the world, there are people who are distilling down these different cannabinoids to get one specific reaction, to get a very specific thing done. You could do that with tinctures, with pills, with edibles. This isn't about having guys smoking joints in the locker room like Snoop and Dr. Dre back in the day. We're not trying to get to that point. Guys could take a CBD capsule. By the way, I love Snoop and Dr. Dre. Which would be very discreet, that they could take before practice and after practice, that would have all the healing benefits for the brain without getting guys high, without the psychoactive effect of THC. So I
gotta have to cut you off real quick, and
please object if you want
objection, Your Honor.
Okay,
I have something to say on that regard. This is something we talked about earlier with the wink laws. Look, CBD isn't even tested. as you know, in the NFL drug testing policy. So if you want to take your CBD pills, Eben, go ahead. No one's stopping you. But for you to want us to walk out in front of a giant marijuana leaf and hold a press conference and have me take a bong rip.
I don't want that.
Then it's not going to happen, okay?
Good.
There's an element of navigation of the laws and the testing policies that you as an individual need to figure out. We can't hold your hand out there just like I can't hold your hand on the field. Okay? You learn what it's like on the field and you learn how to navigate off the field, and that's what makes a pro a pro. Okay? CBD, we don't test for it. Take it all you want. Okay? It's the THC we don't like.
Look, as
and
a
just
player,
because we don't understand it.
why not silently remove marijuana from the banned substance list? You don't have to tell anybody about it. You could send a letter to the PA, to the players, saying that this was removed. It will not be tested for. There's no reason for a PR stunt to blow it up to make some, big event out of it. Like the NHL does.
Well, before you respond, Roger, I'm going to give you a second part to respond to as well, and that will be this will be our final question for the session. And since we're talking about punishment and testing, eventually a player will earn himself a 4-game suspension for testing positive for cannabis. Why 4 games?
Because, like you just said, eventually we have no choice but to suspend him. Because by the time a guy does miss 4 games, as Eben can tell you, Eben, I looked up your file. I saw that you were suspended, and it wasn't because you tested positive once, was it? Or twice, was it?
No.
No, it was 4 times, wasn't it?
No.
3.
No.
How many?
I tested positive once for Ritalin.
I'm not talking about for what. How many times did you piss dirty?
1 time.
Then how did you get suspended for 4 games?
It was a PED.
Okay. So we're not talking about PEDs. I don't want to go down that route. So, what I do want to talk about is a 4-game suspension for cannabis.
I never tested positive for cannabis. Just let the record say that.
The record has been noted.
So also let the record say that you are arguing for something that was never even a hindrance for you while you were playing. So but back to the 4-game suspension. Okay. First time you get test positive, you get put in the substance abuse program and you get counseling. You do not miss any time whatsoever, okay? The second time you test positive, you also do not miss any games, okay? It's the third time where we have to punish you. And we don't want to punish you. We don't want you to lose those games because you lose out on that hard-earned money as well. But I will tell you that money that we take from you goes to me, okay? And for that reason, I'm not that upset by it. But at the same time, I would much rather prefer a world in which these guys did not miss any time for testing positive, whether it's for cannabis or any other drug they might consume, or the PEDs. Now, I will say that PEDs is something that we don't tolerate in this league. We want a level playing field, and it's not surprising to me, Eben, that this is your stance. If you have also tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, it seems to me that you don't really take the rules very seriously and think that they shouldn't apply to you, whereas your brothers in arms who are going through some of the same stuff are forced to play without that stuff. And so, to me, it devolves your argument a little bit, but I'm not the judge.
I had a therapeutic use exemption to use Adderall because I was diagnosed with ADHD by an NFL doctor.
Boom! Wow, that was amazing, Eben. Great closer. Great slammer.
On a day when I didn't have my Adderall prescription, I took a teammate's Ritalin. I thought, hey, this also treats the same mental disorder that I suffer from, ADHD. Ritalin, Adderall, treat the same thing, work the same way. Maybe they don't work the same way. I don't know, but they treat the same thing. So I took that thinking it wouldn't matter for a drug test. Of course, I was drug tested that day. And months later, at the end of the season, sometime in February, I got a letter from the league saying that I had failed the performance-enhancing drug test for Ritalin and that I was being sentenced to a 4-game suspension.
You know,
Meanwhile, Tom Brady also sentenced to a 4-game suspension for misinflating balls.
Yes, perfect. I wanted to bring that up. Mr. Goodell, do you have a quick response to the fact that deflating balls...
And one more beauty of a decision, giving Ray Rice a 2-game suspension for domestic violence.
Is beating your wife worse than marijuana? Roger Goodell, please respond.
certainly not. And it's not our league policy to say that. No, we take domestic violence very seriously. And as I just explained to you, that the suspension of 4 games does not happen from one bad test with weed. It happens from multiple failed tests. And in the case of Eben, that is unfortunate to hear that that's how it happened. And truly, there are holes in our system. We are aware of that. And you do have recourse to file a grievance with your union. And that's why your union is there, to help you through these kinds of things. Because, of course, a case could be made there. You could, petition us with the league, and I would personally see that. I would look at that and consider that, because that makes sense to me. And a lot of what you have said here today, Eben, makes sense to me. And although I've come in here with a hard stance with the owners, and hey, look, it's my job to do it. I mean, I'm making $50 million a year, guys.
Woo,
I mean,
yeah, boom.
I would
Way
say,
to go.
I'd say anything for $50 million. But
Of course you would.
But what I'm telling you is that I hear you.
Well,
Eben,
Mr. Goodell, we appreciate your hard stance and your soft heart.
Thanks for stopping by today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. And first of all, or one more time, let me tell you, I'm a big fan of the pod. And
That's great.
everyone in the league office is listening to it. I mean, we love when it comes out. Everyone's like running through the office, cheering. We put it on through the loudspeakers throughout the building. We all really get excited for it.
That's
and,
really exciting to hear.
Yeah, and so being able to meet you guys in person and Gandalf, and it's been a dream come true. So, hey, stop by our office anytime.
Thank you.
And
Well, maybe we should get high sometime.
well, maybe we'll talk about that off camera.
We're off camera right now. We're just recording. All right, court is now adjourned. We'd like to thank both the NFL for coming in to discuss this case, and we will be deliberating with a jury of our peers, and we will hopefully come back with a decision shortly. So thank you very much from the Honorable Judge Jed. And back to Nate and Eben in the studio to wrap it up.
Woo! That was quite a convo. Nate, you missed it, brother.
What happened?
Man, Roger
Just
Goodell
sorry I'm
stopped
late,
by.
you guys. Sorry.
Yeah,
Fuck.
Shit.
Traffic's fucking crazy, man.
It was okay, though,
All right.
because we had a really positive conversation
Wait.
with Roger Goodell.
Was that because I saw some guy leaving?
Yes.
Shut the fuck up.
That was him.
Wow.
That was him. Came
Wow.
by to have a really thoughtful discussion on cannabis in the NFL.
Did you tell him where we stand?
I did, man. I did. I think I rocked it. Jed?
Yeah, under from my tutelage, I could tell you were doing well.
Okay. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Hey, man. I'm sorry I missed it.
Yeah.
How was Roger? Was he cool or?
He was really handsy with me,
Yeah.
at least. I don't know about Eben.
Not super cool,
Yeah.
but, it was okay. He's a huge fan of the pod.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Fuck
That
that's
was
great.
cool to hear. And he said that they cheer through the offices. You can hear cheers
Wow.
every time a new pod's released. So
Who would have thought, right?
who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, guys, it's been a very, very exciting afternoon here in Mar Vista, California. Thank you, Jed, Nate.
Thanks.
Thanks for your contribution.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry I was late again.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you guys next time on the Mindful Warrior podcast. Thanks for listening to the Mindful Warrior podcast, brought to you by Athletes for Care. a health and wellness resource for athletes of all ages. Don't miss out on Nate's books, Slow Getting Up and Fantasy Man. Be sure to check out BringTheHurt.com, a pain advocacy platform dedicated to alternative healing practices. Visit BeTrueOrganics.com for all of your CBD needs. Use promo code BRITAIN, all caps 10, for a 10% off discount.